I'm going to Hawaii by myself, because cancelling everything wouldn't be too good for the company. You understand, right?
My husband says he's going on a trip to Hawaii alone, in front of his daughter who had come down with a high fever the day before the trip. Not too satisfied with how he was handling the situation, I really couldn't say anything to stop him, mostly because it was he who had worked so hard to get the tickets to Hawaii in the first place. I sent my husband off before going back inside to take care of my sick daughter. The next day, she still had a high fever, and I turned on the TV as I got her to sleep. That's when I beheld my own husband on the screen, alongside a woman arm in arm. I immediately recorded the footage to save the evidence of the affair. I couldn't forgive him for cheating on me and my daughter. I called my in-laws and showed them the proof of my husband's affair. This is the story of how my husband's suspicious behavior turned out to be something totally unexpected and cruel, and how I made a plan with my in-laws to send both him and his sweetheart to the darkest pit of hell. My name is Naomi, and I'm 33 years old. I used to live with my husband, Grant, and my daughter, Ruby. Grant and I had been married for 8 years, and right around this whole incident started, Ruby was in her last year of kindergarten, and she was growing to be such a sweet child, as she was always helping me in whatever way she could. Our family was very close once upon a time. We went shopping together on weekends, and we always went on trips outside the city during long holidays. We occasionally even went abroad for these trips. Last year we went to Hong Kong for about a week. We were well known through the neighborhood for being such a close family. More recently, Ruby had started asking for a younger sister, and I started thinking about having a second child. But just when I started thinking about it, Grant started acting pretty strangely. Starting about a year ago, the way he spent his holidays became something completely different, as it really didn't include us at all. We used to all go shopping together as a family on his days off, but he started saying he was going fishing with a couple of junior colleagues from his job. What was especially strange was that Grant never had a hobby of fishing, at least not to my knowledge. But once he went fishing with his junior colleagues, he became addicted to it and started going almost every week. I thought it was great how he found a new hobby he was passionate about, but the fact that he always excluded me and Ruby from these activities made me wonder where his priorities lay. Ruby used to go to the park or shopping with her daddy on his days off, and now that he spent those away from home, she missed him terribly. During the week after he came home from work, Ruby could only spend time with her daddy when she went and shower with him, and that was why she always looked forward to shower time very much. However, the only time she was able to spend time with her daddy had also disappeared before she knew it. And that was because not only did Grant do other things on weekends, but he additionally started working overtime more often on weekdays and started coming home late. His company had never had him work overtime, and up until when everything changed, he came home on time every day. So I was perplexed by this sudden change in working hours. He suddenly started working overtime, and that was almost every day, no less. Grant had told me that his workplace had recently partnered with a major company, which was why they were going to be busy for quite a while. However, it was obvious that he was working overtime too often. And I was even a little suspicious of my husband's behavior, and I had good reason to be. As you might already know, most companies pay their employees more if they willingly stay after the usual time when work finishes to keep at it. Otherwise, it could be considered a form of exploitation, and the company could be called out and even destroyed because of it. Grant's workplace was known to be very worker-friendly, and thus they should evidently have the get paid more if you work more hours policy instated, which would mean Grant should have had a pretty substantial increase in his salary, since he worked overtime pretty much every day. But no such increase in salary was seen anywhere. How do I know this? I became a housewife when I got married per Grant's request, and I was therefore in charge of managing his account. I know exactly what his normal salary was, and all those hours of overtime notwithstanding, the numbers never increased at all. I had hoped that even if his salary did not go up, his winter bonus might increase quite a bit as recognition, but it was instead seemed to be actually less than last year's. That evidently made it even stranger. That's why I decided to ask him about his overtime work, touching on the subject of his salary as a foundational evidence. Hey, I know you've been working a lot of overtime lately, but I was wondering why your salary hasn't gone up at all these past few months. Shouldn't you tell someone about this at the company? This is grounds for being called a black enterprise, honey. They should be called out if that's the case.
I can't help it, Naomi. Now that my workplace partnered with a big conglomerate, they don't have much money to spare for paying their employees more.
But it's strange how that's the case, even though you're working so hard. There's no family time, not on weekdays nor on holidays, because you go fishing with your workplace friends. And to top it off, you don't get paid enough. You really are working overtime, aren't you?
What, you doubting me now?
Grant's tone of voice very obviously changed. I'm not doubting you, honey, and I'm not questioning your salary for all the hours you work. It's just that it doesn't seem right.
You've only been talking to me about my salary for the past 10 minutes now. What exactly are you expecting out of me, eh? You asked me to give you a more lavish life?
That's not what I'm saying. When did I ever say... I'm just...
Shut up. You're just a stay-at-home mum, and I don't expect you to complain about my salary, lest we forget it's because of my salary that you and the kid can have a roof over your head and good food to eat. Don't talk to me about my salary again.
With that, Grant went into his room and didn't come out for the rest of the evening. I guess what pissed him off is that me, the one whom he has to take care of financially, said some things about his situation that he didn't particularly like. I figured that talking about his salary anymore would upset him, so I decided not to mention it again. And I thought it would be rude to him and a bit of a blow to his pride despite he worked so hard for us as a responsible husband and father. So I stopped questioning him. The next morning, I woke up and greeted him. He responded to Ruby's, "Good morning, Daddy," but he never responded to me. I thought that was strange, so I greeted him again, but he never answered yet again. After that, Grant and I stopped talking to each other. He would talk to me when Ruby was around, but when we were alone, he would not engage in any conversation at all. Even my daughter would ask me, "Did you and Daddy have a fight?" I was determined I would pull him aside one day soon, after he got home from work, and we would talk about it because I knew her parents never talking to each other wasn't a good thing to behold for Ruby, and there was no way she could ever have the sister she wanted with this situation. He came home on time one evening and was in a very good mood. He greeted me with an "I'm home" and a little peck on the cheek, and our family conversation returned to the way it used to be. Ruby was happy to hear that her daddy and I had patched things up, or so it seemed. Truth be told, I felt a little skeptical about him suddenly being in a better mood. But there's nothing better than a family that gets along well. With this in mind, I was cleaning up Grant's belongings while he was taking a bath with Ruby, and then I found a travel ticket to Hawaii in his bag. As I looked at it curiously, he came out of the bath and hurriedly snatched it away from my grasp.
Why, travel vouchers for my workplace's best employees. I got it because I worked overtime a bunch this year.
I see. That's great, honey. I was convinced the reason Grant was in such a good mood was because the company recognized his hard work. And was that the reason, or was it because I was going to Hawaii for the first time in my life that I was so happy? I'm looking forward to the trip. We're going to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Okay, where does Grant's strangeness draw the line? It was one thing after another at this point. I thought this particular response was a little strange, but in the moment, I was far more excited about the trip to Hawaii, so I ran to find Ruby and told her, "Daddy got a travel ticket to Hawaii, sweetheart. We're going on a very fun trip." "We can go to Hawaii? Really? Wow! Thank you, Daddy!" Ruby was so happy that she ran up to her daddy, hugged his legs, kissed his hand, and squealed her thanks. And if Grant wasn't strange enough already with his responses to me, he merely answered,
Yeah.
to her exclamations. I wondered why he was acting like that, but like I said, I was so looking forward to my first trip to Hawaii. After that, I tried to plan the trip with Grant because there were a few things I wanted to try while we were there, but to be frank, he didn't seem too keen on helping me out. Ruby and I were very much looking forward to it, so we kept at making the preparations. Then, the day before the trip, to our great dismay, Ruby came down with a high fever. We rushed to the hospital to have her checked out, but she was not seriously ill. She merely had an overreaction to a mild cold. The problem was there was no way I would take my daughter with a high fever on an overseas trip. When Grant came home from work that evening, I told him that Ruby had a high fever. And this was his response.
Well, that's too bad.
He honestly sounded a little happy to hear that his own daughter was unable to go on the trip. I was expecting him to be at least a little disappointed because the entire thing was canceled. But then he went on to say something that made my jaw drop to the floor.
I'm going to Hawaii by myself because cancelling everything wouldn't be too good for the company. You understand, right?
He then proceeded to take a bath in a good mood and went to bed right after because he said he had to get up and make the plane early the next morning. I thought it was some kind of joke at first. But the next day he was ready to leave for Hawaii with a big suitcase. I told him to wait a minute, and as I was about to protest, he said to me,
I'll be back before New Year's, hon. And don't worry, Ruby. I'll make sure to get you a whole bunch of souvenirs, okay? Maybe we can go next year again, after you be more careful with your health, huh?
I was so shocked that I couldn't process his words, let alone speak a response. His own daughter was sick in bed with a high fever, and he was going on an insanely exciting trip without her or his wife. I was genuinely surprised rather than angry that he would go on a trip alone when we had originally planned to go as a family. But once he said everything he had to say, I really couldn't say anything to stop him, mostly because it was him who had worked so hard to get the tickets to Hawaii in the first place. As the hours passed, Ruby kept on mumbling the word daddy as she lay asleep, combating her high fever. And every time she woke up, she asked after the whereabouts of her daddy in a daze. "Daddy's not here? I want to see him, Mommy." These words were heart-wrenching to hear, and telling her, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, Daddy won't be home for a while." And watching her sadly fall asleep again were amongst the most difficult things I've ever had to do. I felt so sorry for her. Around 30 hours had passed since Grant left for Hawaii, and I was watching television, eating some cereal as I wove my hand through Ruby's golden hair. That's when I beheld a familiar figure on the television screen. It was Grant, my own husband, and he was alongside a woman I didn't recognize, arm in arm. The TV program's theme was interviewing couples who had gone to Hawaii for a long holiday weekend, and Grant and the woman were introduced as a particularly eccentric couple, and they were being interviewed while being very much lovey-dovey and clinging to each other as though they were otters in a cuddle party. I immediately pressed the record button to document the footage and save the evidence because this was downright adultery. Maybe Grant had been having an affair with this woman for a long time. I decided to look at the desktop he had left behind to see if I could find any more evidence of what I believed was going on. Lo and behold, on the desktop, I found messages between Grant and the person whom he was cheating on me with. Probably the woman that was on screen with him, clinging to his arm and kissing his cheek as he answered questions. There were messages like,
My family found out about our trip to Hawaii. I was desperate and I thought of a pretty bad lie in the heat of the moment, but my wife and daughter still want to go. What a huge pain in the arse. I'll give a good reason and somehow make sure they won't go on the day of the trip. Mark my words, Jennifer. We're going to Hawaii together and no one is going to stop us. My daughter has a high fever. What a stroke of luck. Now we can enjoy our trip together without feeling guilty at all.
There were countless messages with the same ambience as these, and they stopped yesterday evening. I was trembling with rage at this point. I'd known for a while that Grant was acting very suspiciously, but I still wanted to trust him for the sake of Ruby, and he'd betrayed her. I looked at the chat history for perhaps 15 minutes and saw that the affair started about a year ago, right when Grant stopped coming home at his usual time, and right when the family weekends we used to have together became a thing of the past. I printed out the messages between him and his sweetheart, then I called my in-laws, the Belmondos, and asked them to come over to my house. They rushed over, and within 10 minutes, my house had become the headquarters of Operation Valkyrie, where I was to expose Grant's intentions to his parents, and hopefully get them to cooperate in bringing him down. As soon as they were comfortable, I gave them some coffee and brownies, and as they munched on them, I started to reveal what their son had been doing for the past year. I showed them the proof of his affair. Mr. Belmondo was furious.
That son of a bitch. You gotta be kidding me. Okay, Naomi, I have a pretty good idea of what this is, but I'll ask anyway. What do you want to do now?
I mean, of course I want a divorce. Good on you. I think that's best, Mrs. Belmondo concurred, and her husband nodded. He then proceeded to propose a plan to me. The proposal was to sell the apartment we were living in. This apartment was actually in Mr. Belmondo's name. My parents-in-law used to live in this apartment, but they gave it to us as a wedding gift when I married their son. Mr. Belmondo didn't want to change the name because he thought all the paperwork would be a hassle. And considering the fact he worked as a construction worker his whole life, anyone could assume anything administrative wasn't his strong suit.
This apartment is in my name, and I can sell it at my discretion anytime I want. How about it?
I'm going back to my parents' house after all this, so of course I'll be ready to move out very soon. I just need to wait until Ruby here recovers completely. She still has a bit of a fever. We understand. Oh, the poor dear. Everything's falling apart around her right as she has a hard time fighting this fever. I'm so sorry, Naomi. I really don't know how to apologize for such a scandal. I'm so sorry.
Make sure to tighten up that son of a bitch when he gets back from that stupid trip of his. Mark my words. I'll make sure he never expects to live a good, simple life ever again.
And the next day, I had Mr. Belmondo complete the procedure of placing the condo up for sale as soon as possible. Ruby's fever was gone after another 18 hours. So we got to work on moving out as early as we could. Grant was going on his stupid trip of adultery for perhaps 10 days and wouldn't be back for at least another week. In the meantime, we got all our stuff out and sold the condo. I sent all of his stuff to his company. All that was left to do was wait until Grant got back. Then everything my parents-in-law and I planned would culminate, and Grant would know once and for all what misery truly means. About a week later, I got a huge number of calls from Grant's number. I left about a dozen of his calls unanswered on purpose before finally answering.
Hey, you changed the locks on the house. We can't freaking get in. What the hell's going on here?
Well, of course you can't get in the house anymore, silly. I mean, even I can't, since it's not even ours anymore. But yes, the locks changed, but not by me.
What the hell do you mean?
You can't get into that apartment because it's sold off. It doesn't belong to us anymore.
That's bullshit. What did you go selling my home behind my back for? What the frick is wrong with you?
Do you really not remember? That condo was never in my name, nor was it in yours. It had always belonged to your father, and he was the one that sold it off. Look, if you want details, you better get your butt over to your parents' house. Mark my words, you'll understand everything once you do. I only said that before hanging up the phone. I left Ruby in the custody of my mother and headed for my parents-in-law's house. By the time I arrived, Grant had already arrived, and he was already getting the lecture of a lifetime by his father. By the time I stepped into the living room, he was already cowering on the floor, kneeling in shame and in defeat. But right when he saw my face,
You're freaking mistaken.
He suddenly became very aggressive.
I didn't cheat on you. I really did go to Hawaii alone. Look, see?
He showed me a photograph of himself in Hawaii. Did he really think I would believe him with just a singular photograph of him like this? I had dubbed a DVD with the evidence of the messages printed from his desktop computer and the video recordings of his interview, alongside the woman known as Jennifer, and showed it to him. Then he must have realized that there was no excuse for what he had done, because he collapsed down onto his knees and started to beg for my forgiveness.
I'm so sorry. I really am so sorry.
Keep apologizing, Casanova. You'll not get any mercy from me. Not now, not ever. You're a traitor, and I can't trust you anymore.
Please don't say that. I beg you.
I want a divorce. I can't live with someone like you anymore.
A divorce? But that's crazy. How can you divorce me after one single trip abroad?
Grant adamantly resisted the idea of a divorce. One trip abroad? Please. This was much, much bigger than that stupid voyage of adulterous scandal. I already knew he'd been cheating on me for a whole year, and he only thought that this trip was the single problem. I snapped.
Please, just don't divorce me. You're a stay-at-home mum too, right? You have to raise our daughter. I know how hard it's going to be for you without me.
He was actually making a presentation to me that I needed him, but none of it was true. Then Mr. Belmondo stood up.
How cowardly can you frickin' be, you bastard? You cheated on Naomi, betrayed our trust in your fidelity, and now you're trying to hook her back with money. You know, son of mine.
His fist then went flying, and Grant was sent sprawling. Grunting and sobbing in pain, Grant remained sitting down on the ground, and his face revealed he had lost his will to fight. Here are the divorce documents. I want you to sign them. I thrust the papers under his nose. With pressure from his father, he reluctantly filled in all the required information and signed the papers. After taking the papers back from my now ex-husband, I said my sincere thanks and goodbyes to my parents-in-law before leaving the house. I then went to City Hall to submit the divorce papers, and they were accepted without any problems. Later on, Grant was fired from his job. I sent proof of the affair to his workplace. I had the hunch that the person with whom he was having an affair, Jennifer, might be someone from his workplace, and I sent the evidence to the company in hopes of finding her, and of punishing her as well. I hit the jackpot, because it turned out that Jennifer really was a coworker of his, and they were both fired from their jobs immediately. Grant called me out of spite after he was fired.
I've been fired from my job because of you, and my life is ruined. You better take responsibility and pay me alimony.
What the hell are you talking about? It's your fault for having an affair in the first place, Mr. Belmondo. It's called getting what you deserve, if you know what I mean. I'm actually not too sure you do know. Repeat after me. Getting what you deserve. Reserve all the excuses for someone who frickin' cares.
God damn it. So I might have been able to do something with myself if all you said was the proof of the affair. But you went and sent all of my stuff to my workplace, and they frickin' got rid of it all. What are you gonna do about it?
Did you hear what I said? Reserve all the excuses for someone who frickin' cares. I don't give a shit what happens to you, as long as you pay me the alimony and child support for my daughter. If you don't pay, I'll hire a lawyer to find you and collect it all. That's all I told him before hanging up. Grant and Jennifer then went on desperately looking for work because they were going to run out of money after they paid me the alimony they owed me. But they haven't been able to find any good new jobs, so they've been living on the edge. Grant tried to ask his parents for help, but he couldn't do so because his ties with them were legally severed. They had no more money before long, and I suppose the stress caused them to fight all the time, and within a year, they had broken up. The reason I know all this is because Grant called me again after his breakup.
Leaving you has made me realise how much you mean to me, and how much my darling daughter means to me. You're all I've got. You were all I ever had, Naomi. I love the old days I had with you, and with Ruby. Surely there are some things you would never realise until you're separated from me, right? I was out of my mind a year ago, and now I truly know how important family is. Please, let's be a family again. Let me prove myself to you, and to Ruby. Please. Hello?
I was sick and tired of him saying too many frickin' convenient things. He talked endlessly to me, and I never gave him a response. Not a single word ever exited my mouth during that phone call, and I just hung up after a couple of minutes and blocked all his calls. Since then, I've been living happily with my daughter at my parents' home. I'm back at work now and getting pretty busy, but I'm going to cherish the time I have with Ruby and raise her well so that she won't feel lonely ever again.